our special guest speaker, Mr. Ade Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer has spent the last 38 years working as a management consultant in the UK, focusing on enterprise support, regeneration, community engagement, and development strategies. He's designed, developed, and delivered training programs on business, community management, and employment skills, and undertaken policy research to inform decisions on the Black and minority ethnic and other disadvantaged communities. He has consulted for many community organizations, implemented capacity building programs, and explored strategies for building community cohesiveness and integration. He combines his work as a management consultant at Equinox Consulting and an associate with the Ubele Initiative with a lot of activism in community and grassroots organizations. He's also involved in the cultural, political, social, and economic advancement of the African heritage community in the UK. Mr. Sawyer is very much a thought leader on African and Ghanaian issues and writes for several journals and newspapers. We welcome Mr. Ade Sawyer to our ABCD event. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I didn't know that I'd done all these things. I'm not going to share my screen, but what I'll do is I'll talk through my topic, and after the event, I will post the slides to Yetunde, if that's okay with you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What I want to talk about this afternoon, it's a topic that I chose for all of us. And the topic is how the Black community has fared in the emergency recovery and adaptation into the new normal. So that's my topic. I want to use this as a backdrop of a Black History Month and also look at how community organizations are going to do with this new normal that we all talk about. Okay. When the COVID crisis hit the rest of the world, it was a major health crisis the whole world over. And it affected certain countries disproportionately. Whilst in most countries in Africa, we did fairly well. In Britain, the Black community revealed the inequalities that we have in the system. And it affected the African heritage and the Asian communities more adversely. We had more infections, and disproportionately, we had more deaths. The conclusions from various research show that there were underlying health risks, but it also showed that the bulk of our people were involved in frontline services. And so as a result, we were more exposed, and it was also found that there were inequalities in the economic way in which people lived in this country. During the emergency, our response as African community organizations was not fast enough. And our voluntary and community organizations were not sufficiently briefed about how the crisis was unfolding. Our community organizations were not able to sufficiently communicate to our communities to warn them that, look, we have a major crisis and this is what we must do. Our community organizations were not strong enough to assist in protecting our people against the health risks that unfolded in early March. And then we went into the lockdown. And there were essential things in the lockdown. It's sort of making sure that we were able to contact people within our community, through our community organizations, through our members, to reach our wider community. It was about ensuring that people had enough food so that they would not go out shopping. It was about ensuring that the vulnerable were well taken care of and provided with the best assurance of contact during this COVID period. Now, our community organizations lacked the resources to deal with the immediate response. We did not have the resources to be able to organize around the basic things of helping with distribution of food. Though some of our churches did brilliantly because they already operated food banks, but our outreach to the community was limited because we could not organize sufficient volunteers to deal with assisting our members and therefore our wider community. The COVID affected our organizations as disproportionately as it affected our people. Most could not provide services. Most actually were crippled and they shut down at the most crucial period when the community needed them most. Our community organizations are shaky and not as resilient as they should be. We sat by as others served our communities, and we could not provide them with culturally appropriate services, like maybe food that they were used to, and certain things that they needed at the time. And then there were several funds that were available for the recovery phase. And our problem was that we're not able to access this funding. Our organizations have all been on shaky grounds, and we continue to chase funding whenever we find it, or if it's advertised, but we end up not getting the funding. So even at the recovery phase, when there were so many funds around, when we applied for funding, we were rejected from getting the funding. The question that I pose now is, why can we not get funding? One of the biggest problems for us is that we are not organized in such a way that we can get funding. Another issue is that though we are delivering much needed services, no one knows what we are doing with the very little money and resources we receive. To what extent do we get the basics of running a community organization right so that we can start doing effective proposals for funding? And I've said all these things, and I agree that it is not our fault that we are not getting funding. So I'm not blaming our community, and I'm not blaming our community leaders. What I'm suggesting is that we can do better. And one of the ways of doing better is to actually start thinking that most funding during this COVID period wanted to know how we're going to provide our services in the new normal. What they were saying is that it's not back to the old way of delivering services. There was a new way that may be pervasive. So they wanted us to think through as to how we were going to adjust and adapt. We needed to show to the emergency that our delivery of service had changed and that COVID had also affected our funding adversely. We needed to show that before the time of COVID, our organizations were doing well, and that with COVID funding, our organizations will be able to survive. We needed to show that we're making adaptations in the way we deliver our services. We're going to take some of the services online. We're going to adhere to social distancing. We're going to do a lot more risk assessment at the basis of everything we do in delivering our services. But there are some funding imperatives that before you can apply for funding, the governance of your organization must be right. You should be holding regular meetings. You should be using the board to make decisions. You have to make sure that we've updated our business plans to show that stakeholders are involved in our projects and that everything we do reflects what the community wants. That we have the right procedures and policies in place for doing things, and that we adopt project management principles that enable us to monitor the delivery of our projects and to be able to evaluate our projects after we have received funding. When we set up organizations, we should not just be thinking about now, we should be thinking about the future. So we are looking at how we select trustees. We are looking at how many times we meet. We are looking at the people we have on board will contribute to the organization, and that from time to time, maybe on a yearly, bi-yearly basis, we are able to review the people who are on the board, and that these people are able to supervise our projects and make sure that they are properly evaluated. We have to ask ourselves, how are the trustees able to help us in fundraising? When there's an event, are they able to attend on behalf of our organization? To what extent are they able to actually engage the funders to ensure that our monitoring and evaluation of our projects take place? Do we really do business planning? Do we have a business plan? How did we come at doing the business? To what extent are we able to make sure that our staff are able to deliver? And indeed, is our business plan a smart plan? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And is it time bound? Have we costed the plan with proper and reasonable budgets? Who will deliver what? And have we built in evaluated capacity so that we know what the timelines are and we know that we are able to deliver and report our service? For me, having a business plan is very critical. And I know many of us do not like doing a business plan. We have the ideas, they remain in our head. But when we have to do a funding application, we need to be able to take our business plan and translate what is in the business plan into the funding application. Let me talk about quality issues. We need a quality statement, and we need to have all the basic and relevant policies and procedures that control how we operate. Project development, complaints and compliments, equal opportunities, staff training, safeguarding, confidentiality, health and safety. And now increasingly, we need to be able to put into what we do the various COVID protocols. These policies should be reviewed on a yearly basis so that we are able to incorporate new ways of doing things within our organization. We need to focus on the objectives of the project that we deliver. We need to be able to allocate the right resources so that we ensure that we are able to make sure that our users receive what they were promised and that they are satisfied. We need to monitor the delivery of the projects so that we know the critical milestones, so that we know that after the project is done, we are able to evaluate the process and the content. And we need to get into the habit of providing reports so that funders know what it is that we've used the money from and how this has been able to make an impact on our users and the community at large. To do this, we need a fundraising strategy. The strategy is saying that how does management, which is the brain of the organization, get involved in delivery? To do this, we need to ensure that we have some current funding, which is the body of the organization, and that we build on these little monies that we have as we search for new funding. We need to ensure that we have viable projects, because it is the viable projects that become the blood of the organization. So if you look at an organization in terms of the brain, the body, and the blood, everything must be in tune in order for us to be able to be successful in looking for funding. And then when we talk about sources of funding, perhaps we need to start from the local before we get to the regional. Perhaps when we get to the regional, we need to look at different sectors. I've seen too many organizations that want to do everything. The important thing is that increasingly, organizations need to be specializing in certain thematic areas and then be able to collaborate with other organizations that are doing other things. We need to look at how we'll go to local trusts and charities. Look at their priorities before we apply for the funding. We need to be able to go to charitable trusts, look at their priorities, and then ask them for core funding, because it's not only project funding. We need to tell them that we need some money to employ staff. We need some money to develop the organization. And then we go to various national charitable trusts who may fund us for longer periods and who may be able to give us the combination of the core and project funding that we require. And we need to show that our funding base is diversified. We have donations, we have grants, we have contracts, we have trading. Donations from our membership, we are able to do a lot of fundraising events so that we have at least money at all times. We're able to talk to companies so that we are able to get some sponsorship from them. We are able to look at individuals who we may encourage to leave as legacies. We need to then go to the local authority to try and get grants for the project work that we carry on. We need to be able to sign contracts to tell them that, look, we are prepared to get match funding from somewhere. We are prepared to do a service level agreement. And since commissioning started, our major problem is that most local authorities will commission projects with organizations that can do a specific piece of work and have the expertise. We need to find avenues for trading so that we are able to sell our services to other people in the wider community. I don't see any African charity shops around. I don't understand why we don't have them. I'm sure they would do good business if we had charity shops selling African clothes like we have within the mainstream community. So there's a process. And that process is that we start small, but we prove to funders that we have the capacity to plan, execute, and report. We need to be able to show the funders that we are diversified and that we can prove our capacity and capability to manage the funds. And more importantly, that we are collaborating with others, we are forming partnerships, and we are working in consortiums that prove that we are relevant players in our community. And as an example of programming, there are organizations that write funding letters every week looking for 5,000. On a monthly basis, they do a major funding application looking for 10,000. On a quarterly basis, they do a bigger proposal for 20,000. In a half yearly, they make application for 50,000. And then every year, they at least try and make an application for 100,000. What I'm saying is that systematic running and applying for funds is what keeps the organization going. And once you have a business plan, it is much easier for you to translate the information you have in your business plan into your funding application. So where are we now? We've survived over the years. Black organizations are doing wonderful things in helping people within their communities. But we don't tell anybody. If we can survive, then we can thrive. And if we can thrive, we need to now adopt formal approaches to running our organizations. And let me say this, we are resilient. We've been able to prove to all people that despite all the problems, despite all the shaky ground on which we are, we still keep on delivering service and we keep on doing things. I'm going to give you an address, www.fundingcentral.org, to give you all the funding that you are able to get. And let me end this session by saying that I meant this to be more of a motivational session, but I think these are the issues that you keep in mind as you continue to run your organizations and deliver your services. And I'm happy that I've been able to come and talk to some of you during this Black History Month period. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clear. We are very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Speech, as well as the information that has been passed across. And we hope to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. But here's a question from one of our participants. Is there an independent body who can provide support or service of fundraising for anyone who has an initiative or a project, either local or international.
Okay. There are several organizations around that may be able to help. During this summer, I worked with an organization called Ubele, where I delivered a lot of seminars and a lot of one-on-one support to people who were looking for funding. Okay. But these things come from time to time. Locally, if there's any council for voluntary services in your area, they may be the best organization to approach. But if there are any issues that anybody wants to contact me, you can contact me through Yetunde, and I'll find the most appropriate place or person for you who might be able to help you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We're very grateful for that. So if you do need these kind of services, contact Yetunde and she'll be able to forward you the information that you need to get those the help that you need. Thank you very much again, Mr. Sawyer. We are very grateful for your very enlightening and creative talk today.
Yeah, and I'll circulate the slide through Yetunde, who will make sure that it gets to all of you. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But if you have any further questions, please post them in the chat and we will get those across to Mr. Sawyer, who will be able to give you answers to your question. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a charity called More Rainbow in Nigeria. Africans are very charitable